Stratus Foods is the industry partner you can depend on when you're looking for the very best in fats and oils. Our team of expert researchers, developers, and innovators have helped countless businesses just like yours bring their most delicious menus to life. With products that are reliable, sustainable, and ready to meet any challenge, you can fry, bake, sauté, and grill with confidence. Stratus Foods, we've got you covered. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Extra Serving, a Nation's Restaurant News podcast. I am your host, Holly Petre. This week, we're going to be talking about how restaurants are reacting to the introduction of AB 1228 in California. The bill, which went into effect April 1st, raised the minimum wage for fast food workers to $20 an hour. Several restaurants and franchise groups prepared for the raise by laying off workers, mostly delivery drivers, while others are responding now quietly. People have noticed that chains like Chipotle have raised prices in California by over 5% secretly. How will customers in the industry react? Also, restaurant tech seems to be going through it. On Wednesday, delivery company Waitr filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy after several years of bad decisions and a changing landscape. On the other side of tech, restaurants have been experiencing more and more tech outages, sometimes because of the myriad programs they use to get by. One of Joanna's predictions for 2024 was a consolidation of restaurant tech, and we may be seeing it moving forward. Plus, we will get to hear some James Beard Award commentary from our very own Bret. And now it's time to introduce my New York-based co-hosts.
Hi, I'm Bret Thorn, Senior Food and Beverage Editor of Nation's Restaurant News.
Hi, I'm Joanna Fantozzi, Senior Editor with Nation's Restaurant News.
Yeah, we got a New York-only crew here today. Very excited. We're all in various places of New York. Well, you guys are in the office. I'm at home. But it's nice to have like a little crew here. So welcome to the podcast, guys. We've never had this combination.
I know, very exciting.
I'm actually in the office's wellness room, which is often referred to as the crying room, but it's a good place to find a quiet space. And so that's
yes, that is why I did not go into the office. There is no quiet space. As I'm sure restaurant people know, there is no quiet space. We've done plenty of interviews with executives in the restaurants themselves. Even in a closed restaurant, it's still loud. So, and then at corporate offices, most people have these open floor plans. So everyone's used to it. Everyone knows what's going on by now. But let's get into the news because we're covering things that are very specific to you guys accidentally. I didn't plan it this way. I just happened that you guys covered the big news of the week. So, I mean, the biggest news that we've been talking about for at least 3 months is AB 1228. I mean, it is a huge deal. It raised the minimum wage from $16, which it just started in January in California, to $20 an hour for fast food workers. Again, fast food, a little vague, because we don't use the term fast food in the industry, but still. So it had some issues with the whole baking bread and Panera thing. And, you know, we went through all of those iterations and it started as the FAST Act. But now it's in place. We have this $20 out of minimum wage. We had all those Pizza Hut franchisees lay off their delivery workers. We are now seeing some pricing increases from bigger chains that Mark Kalinowski reported on. And so we're getting a little bit more of an image of what is happening in California. So what do you guys have to say? I mean, Joanna, you've covered this a lot, so maybe you can kind of kick us off.
Sure. So I'm actually I'm writing about this today, although it won't be today when this podcast airs. And it's really it's a situation that I would say is most impactful to franchisees. As we know, many, and I would say pretty much most of the major restaurant chains in America mostly rely on franchising. That is not the case 100% across the board, most notably Chipotle and Starbucks. And so Mark Kalinowski, a great analyst, he and his team analyzed some of the pricing increases at about, I believe it was 25 restaurants at several of the major chains, including Starbucks and Chipotle, but also including Wendy's, Taco Bell. Today was also McDonald's and Burger King, I believe. And he noted that at a lot of these restaurants, they had taken between February and April 1st a 7 to 8% pricing increase on at least a couple of the menu items. And it is interesting because this is not pricing increases across the board. It is just some of the menu items. And in Starbucks's case, they had they had basically confirmed that that these pricing increases are of less than $1 per menu item, and I believe that they really only affect about a third of the menu items. And so it's not pricing increases across the board, but 7 to 8% is pretty significant. And some of the other chains have taken kind of, it seems, more modest pricing increases. According to Kalinowski's reporting, it was about a 3% menu increase. Now, we have to put a little asterisk on this because they only called about 25 restaurants. That's not all of the restaurants in California. And they looked at a couple of sample menu items. So this is basically a sample size study, a fairly small sample size study. And so we can't exactly say across the board, oh, they took X percentage, because that is not necessarily the case. Also, the big difference with Taco Bell is that they franchise, and so that is a really big difference there. And I understand why, if that 3% number is accurate, again, not 100% sure if it is, but if that 3% number is accurate, it definitely makes sense that franchisees would want to take more modest pricing increases, because they have a lot more to lose. A lot of franchisees are small business owners, and they are struggling to figure out how to balance all of this. They don't know how to balance being owning these restaurants, and you can't just raise prices astronomically, because then people no longer go to your restaurant. I spoke to somebody several months ago, and who was a Dunkin' franchisee, not in California, but in Massachusetts, where another state where they had gone through minimum wage increases. And he basically said there's only so much people are willing to pay for a cup of coffee, which is true. I spoke to a franchisee more recently in California who said that he wasn't sure what he was going to do. He's cutting hours. He's cutting some. He stopped hiring. He's cutting some. Going to have to cut some employees. And so it really does seem like, this California bill has had some challenges in being implemented into the restaurant industry.
So, it's interesting. I'd be curious to know what kind of price increases there have been across the country, because prices are going up everywhere. And, a 3 to 7% increase is something, but it's not exactly game changing. And another thing that I think operators in California need to take into consideration, this is something that years ago, pre-pandemic, California operators were telling me about, like specifically Wetzel's Pretzels, which it is in, shopping malls and places where a lot of restaurant workers also work and will go and eat. And he found that every time the minimum wage went up, sales went up because their customers had a higher income. And that is, I think, something that operators should take into consideration before they panic and start firing everybody. Their prices, raising prices might be something that the newly richer workers at other quick service chains will be able to handle and pay for. Also, when it comes to raising menu prices in general, often if restaurants are smart, they understand what prices are inelastic. For example, as you said, Joanna, how much someone's going to pay for a cup of coffee, and which ones are more elastic, and guests are more willing to pay more money for something, whether that it depends on the market and the chain, but some menu prices, when they go up, customers are like, cool, shut up and take my money. Like, for example, at the other end of the spectrum, in steakhouses can charge insane amounts of money for steak, because when it's time to go out for a steak, steakhouse customers are like, whatever, take my money, give me a good steak, and I'm going to buy an expensive bottle of wine with it. So it's something that operators should really think about and really analyze how their customers behave.
Yeah, there is more pricing flexibility, I think, than some people realize. I actually spoke to an analyst from KeyBank yesterday who brought up such an interesting point that I had no idea. This guy's particularly Eric Gonzalez. He specifically specializes in Chipotle. That's his main brand that he covers. And he said that actually Chipotle's prices in California have always been extremely low compared to other larger high income states like New York, Illinois, and maybe Texas, some other larger states. And I find this interesting, and I said, well, why? And he said because they had to lower their prices more than they should have to compete because California has so many burrito places. And I didn't even think about that. And I think that's so interesting. He said, so actually, Chipotle, possibly the reason why their prices increased so much, that 7 to 8% likely, is because of the fact that they have a lot of room to play with, which is not something that I realized.
Well, and it's interesting, Joanna, you've said this in previous podcasts, and Bret, this is kind of what you were saying, is that when people have more money to spend when the minimum wage goes up, and we're probably going to see the minimum wage go up across businesses in California, not just in the fast food industry, but probably in shopping and retail. Like, we're going to see wages go up across the board. And so people across the board are going to have more money. And so they're going to be putting that money into goods. We've seen that when there are recessions and people put their money into experiences. Like, they want the food. They don't want to buy clothing as much, but they want to eat. Like, they want to. And so I think that that's something to think about, but I haven't seen as much on the California version, specifically, but I've seen a lot on social media about McDonald's prices skyrocketing, and people are noticing. And I'm curious to know if when all of these price increases, really make a difference for these customers, I wonder if we're going to see a really big social media backlash, because the McDonald's backlash, at least on the East Coast, has been pretty extreme. I wonder if, I know there was a while, I think at the Data Central presentation at Create last year, Jack Lee was saying that like a McDonald's burger in Connecticut, in one town in Connecticut, is the most expensive in the entire country. So I just think I think we're going to see a backlash. And once it hits social media versus just us and B2B, it's going to be a big thing to clean up.
Well, maybe. I mean, sometimes there's a big social media expression of discontent, but that doesn't mean that customers are actually behaving differently. Just because, everybody is upset on TikTok doesn't mean that people aren't still going through the drive-thru and getting their burgers, fries, and shakes.
Yes and no, it's actually interesting because normally I'm with you on that. Interestingly enough, Starbucks and 2 quarters ago said that the boycotts, the social media calls for boycotts on both sides of the Gaza crisis, did have an impact on their sales that quarter, which is interesting. And I feel like usually though people don't put their money where their mouth is. But actually my question, and this is genuinely a question, like I don't know the answer to it, is so it does kind of make sense that if minimum wage goes up, people have more discretionary income to be able to purchase things. However, not everyone in the country obviously is paid the minimum wage. And so for salaried workers, when minimum wage goes up, either nationally, which it hasn't for a very long time, or state by state, and kind of this trend, does that mean generally that salaried workers' wages go up as well? So I have no idea. I'd be curious if that also correlated, and that would make more sense then than a larger swath of the country would be able to have that more of that discretionary income.
It doesn't affect salary. It affects hourly workers. So like somebody can be hourly and make $30 an hour, but somebody who, like in New York City, I benefited from when it turned $15 an hour. And so it increases everybody's salary. So like if if California were to raise its whole minimum wage to $20, I think it's at 16 right now. If it were to raise the whole thing, so basically the minimum salary requirement would increase because $20 an hour multiplies to more than $16 an hour. So that's like, I don't believe California has the tip credit. So I believe every worker is now going to be making $20, or I mean, I'm sure they're going to have to compete anywhere that's not. You'd hope that nice big restaurants would be paying more than $15 or $16 an hour. But, that could be something that we see competition with, because if you're working at a restaurant, hours aren't great. You don't know how much you're going to make that night, and you're at $16 and you could go to the McDonald's down the street and make $20 an hour. That could be something we see as well. But yes, it raises the cap for what can be possible.
Yeah, certainly when minimum wages go up, hourly employees who normally make more than minimum wage, they are going to demand an increase anyway. And one thing I think to consider in general about raising the minimum wage, some people like to talk about the rich people being job creators. That is not the case in the United States. The American economy is driven by consumer spending. When you put money in the hands of consumers, they drive the economy. And when you put money in the hands of low-income consumers, they spend it because it materially improves their standard of living. As opposed to rich people, if they get extra money and they buy a third yacht, they could probably have done fine with the 2 yachts. So they're less likely to pour that money back into the economy than if you give it to low-income people.
Blah blah blah. Reaganomics. Blah. As in, but we don't want to get political. Obviously, we don't want to get political. Just reminded me of the whole trickle down economic. I don't. You know what? I'm just not going to comment on that.
Bubble up economics is what we should be talking about.
Yeah. But so I actually think the minimum wage to me, the minimum wage is $20 in California right now, because I've said this, I think, on previous podcasts and also in my stories, that if you're being paid $20, if a worker is being paid $20 at McDonald's, why would they go to Target and work for 16? So effectively, the minimum wage has increased for everybody in that state.
But what's nice about this is that people in the back of house at a lot of these QSRs are now also getting these wage increases. And so hopefully that will make back of house at higher end restaurants, those workers who are working at the dish station, they can go to another restaurant and say, I'm going to make more money there. And that would effectively increase their wages. So we're really going to see I think we're going to see the back of the house benefit from this more than anything else, which is great because everybody deserves a living wage. So it'll be nice to see it increase there too. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Also, especially, sorry, go ahead, Brett.
I was going to say we do have to hope that the hourly employees who are getting raises don't feel, even though they're making more money, they still might feel the sticker shock of prices going up, because we are not rational when it comes to spending money. And if something goes from $4.95 to $5.25 or whatever, it might cause people to hesitate and panic, or start making bologna sandwiches at home or whatever. That could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you need to when it comes to economics, you just really have to balance that, and make sure that the inflation doesn't kind of get out of hand. And I think that especially you want those lower income workers who might be being paid a minimum wage, you want them to be able to spend more, because especially in a state like California, where the cost of living, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the cost of living in California is the highest in the country. It's surpassed New York, I believe. I think. But if it is the cost of living in California, especially in the major cities, especially in San Francisco, in LA, is extreme. It's astronomical. And so it absolutely makes sense that the $20 an hour would make a huge difference. And in many cases, it still might be difficult to make a living and to get by day to day then.
I couldn't live in New York on $20 an hour.
I was going to say I make more than $20 an hour, and I went out to get vanilla yesterday to bake. It has gone up so much in price. It's insane. And I was almost like, I make $20 an hour and I can't even afford this vanilla. I got the little tiniest one. So Even I'm seeing it in the stuff that I'm buying.
Sometimes the imitation vanilla is fine. I'm just throwing that out there.
They didn't have it at Whole Foods, and that's my closest
Oh,
food store.
okay.
All right, so let's talk about
Stop and
tech. Joanna,
translate.
we'll head over to your beat here. So we got some tech news this week. We've spoken about it, but we have the Waitr ASAP, uh, which is a weird name. Glad they got rid of it, or got rid of the whole company apparently. So they declared Chapter 7, which just dissolves everything. And so we were talking yesterday about the fact that like delivery companies are seeing less and less competition because the big players are getting more and more of the market share. So this kind of fell by the wayside. Various decisions on the way there, but it was a thing coming. But so what do you think is happening in the delivery space, or do you think this was a larger tech problem?
I don't think that this is indicative necessarily of a problem. Honestly, I mean, it is a shame that ASAP slash Waiter is no longer. I remember we used to cover them quite a bit about like 3, 4 years ago. But it is when it comes to the tech vendors, it is survival of the fittest. And I just think that in general, there are too many technology vendors, and it honestly benefits restaurant operators from having less competition. This is not to say that they should turn into a monopoly, but just in general, tech vendors, there's so much to choose from. And so consolidation in the tech industry is a good thing. Now, when it comes to specifically delivery, we talked about this the other day, Holly. I think that there is more of a concern of that there is less competition out there now. I mean, I think that we're in the golden age of food delivery. I do think that it makes sense that some of the weaker players in the industry have fallen by the wayside, like ASAP slash Waiter. But I do think that basically you have these three major competitors, DoorDash, Uber, Grubhub, and I am not convinced that Grubhub won't be snatched up by either one of its competitors. I'm expecting that to happen not any day now because their parent company has been saying that they wanted to sell them, I think, for now 2 years. So I'm not expecting that to necessarily happen any day now, but I do think that less competition in the food delivery space specifically is not is not great for restaurants. And I was actually watching I didn't get this idea on my own necessarily, but I was actually watching a John Oliver episode, and he was talking about in the tech space, specifically in social media tech space, and companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc., how they have kind of banded together and created this oligopoly. So kind of like a not quite a
Cartel.
monopoly. Right, kind of, yeah, right. Kind of like a monopoly, but multiple companies that are kind of powerful all together and pressuring others to leave the industry. Either they're gobbled up by so some of their smaller competition is gobbled up. Like for example, I mean this was a while ago, but Facebook acquiring WhatsApp and Instagram. And then it creates they effectively work together, even though they're competitors with each other. But they effectively work together to kind of squash any other competition. And I am a little bit concerned that that's what's happening in the delivery space. It's obviously not on as large of a scale as Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Um, but I do think that DoorDash especially has something like 60 to 70% of the market share now. And I don't think necessarily that Waitr slash ASAP was making that much of a dent in the marketplace, but I do think that restaurants benefit from more competition in the delivery space.
Well, are the even the big third-party delivery companies making a profit yet? For a while, they were just losing money and causing restaurants to lose money and causing customers to spend twice as much as probably they should for delivery. So I question whether that's a golden age of delivery or if there's just a lot of delivery and everyone's losing money.
I mean, I think that they're I don't actually know what's happening financially, but from the outside, both as a consumer and in the industry, it appears that they are just being greedy. That
I
there
was going to
is,
call them vampires. Would that have been out of line? Sorry, third-party delivery companies.
well, it just appears that, like, so when I order here, I have the New York City fee because they have to pay them $19 an hour now. And then I have like a bunch of other fees that are specific to New York. And I'm just like, this seems like you, and then there's hidden fees too. There's fees that they just say additional fees. They don't explain it. They don't say anything else, which I believe is soon to be illegal, hopefully, with the junk fees. So it's just when you think about all these fees they're tacking on, the restaurants aren't getting any of it. The restaurants are paying them. So, like, how can they not be not only making money, but like swimming in it?
Yeah. So I actually just did some quick research because I thought I knew the answer to this, but just wanted to fact check myself.
Thank you, Joanna.
Grubhub is not profitable. Uber is, but asterisk there. I if I had to guess, much of their profit does come from the ride sharing service. And DoorDash is not yet profitable, but is almost profitable. They have almost broken even.
Almost broken even while bleeding restaurants and consumers dry.
Yeah.
I mean, I go out to restaurants. I don't remember the last time I got delivery. I actually put on my shoes. I want to get my steps in. But I'm not normal. I know that. And we all live in New York, which is not really like from a perspective of behavior, it's not really part of the rest of the countries.
I don't know. I ordered
Yeah,
Taco Bell yesterday, and it came in 10 minutes. From the time I placed pay to the time it was they rang my bell, 10 minutes
Well,
on
this has been true in
not
New
being
York.
down.
This has been true in New York of especially Chinese restaurants in this city. Like I kind of feel like they are able to open wormholes. I mean, I would hang up the phone because that's how long I've been ordering delivery. I'd hang up the phone and they would ring my doorbell. And the place was like a mile away. How did they even get there in time? It's incredible.
right. And well, I could tell you a little bit about that
Thank you.
is that a lot of these companies, specifically DoorDash, but I don't know if the others do this as well, they incentivize drivers and delivery drivers to get your food faster. And so you will see things like in New York City, it's bikes. So them taking their e-bikes and just like pummeling into traffic or going way faster than they should and risking their lives, frankly, just to make sure that they don't get dinged. And honestly, yes, these dashers and other delivery drivers do get dinged if they don't deliver food fast enough. And so that's definitely part of it. And like you said, it is a system that doesn't really benefit a lot of people. I would say, so actually, I would say that the people it most benefits is probably the consumer, I guess, because we get to sit in our house and have Taco Bell delivered in 10 minutes. But the delivery driver that may have delivered your food may have ran several red lights. I don't know, I'm making this up, but to get that food to you on time. And a lot of these companies are, as we said, struggling to make a profit. And restaurants themselves are getting these 30% commission fees.
Well, there was
Well,
that
I'm talking
movement at the
about
beginning of the pandemic, like first thing in the pandemic, maybe the first 6 months. No, the first year, where there was almost like a union of delivery drivers in New York City on their bikes, where they were talking about how they don't have health care, how if they get injured or killed, they have no way to rectify that. They lose all their money from the job. And so there was a group that was really trying to advocate for these drivers. And I know they had a bill out there. I'm not sure if it passed. Probably should have looked that up before this, but they were talking about, I didn't think I was going to talk about it. They were talking about that these workers need health care, need injury help, need like there's no protection for them. So even when they're incentivized to go faster and they hurt themselves, there's no way for them to get up and get money while they're recovering or something like that.
one, and even before the whole third-party delivery thing, I mean, when my Chinese restaurants were able to open a wormhole, this was back in the days when I would pick up the phone and I would place my order, and they still were super fast. So, I don't know about incentivizing dashers. I mean, I don't know.
Or Hubbers? Is that what Grubhub would be? I feel like we need a name for all of them. Uber Eatsers?
Postmates calls them couriers.
That's
I
boring.
like couriers.
Brett's
I
like, yes,
like
and I'm
that.
like, no.
Like I like calling restaurant customers instead of guests. I like being direct.
Interesting. All right, well, let's switch over to our other tech story, Joanna, which is kind of in the same vein of what you were talking about in this consolidation, which is, your prediction for 2024. One of them was tech consolidation. And so several of these companies, McDonald's and Panera specifically, have seen these tech outages. One has said it wasn't a cybersecurity attack. The other is TBD. But you and I were talking and you were saying that a lot of it is because there is so many tech options. They're not streamlined. A lot of people are doing all sorts of things. And so the streamlining would help. But, what else is sort of happening in this outage segment?
Well, I don't want to be boring, but it is just tech outages are something that happens and is a way of life, unfortunately. And I think it becomes news when companies as large as McDonald's and Panera experience system-wide outages. And whether it has to do with cybersecurity or not, I talked to a couple of IT professionals, and basically there's only so much you can do to prevent an outage. I mean, there are things that you can do, like making sure that there are backup systems, and making sure that you only partner with reputable tech companies that regularly check the status of their systems. And so there are definitely things that you can do to protect yourself from a tech outage, but these things do happen. And I think that basically the goal though is to make sure, if and when it does happen, you are able to get back online faster, and that you could communicate with everyone what exactly is going on. I was lurking around in the Panera subreddit and saw a lot of posts, a lot of panicked posts from employees saying that this has been going on for a couple of days now, and it's just people have to pay with cash, and of course, and their stores are being overwhelmed, and it seemed like there was like a lack of resources there. And I don't know exactly how long the outage lasted. I think it was a couple of days. I think McDonald's was slightly less than a day. But like I said, there's only so much you can do to prevent it, but just you kind of have to stay on top of your game and make sure that you do as much as you can to get those systems back online.
Well, now that people are so reliant on all sorts of tech, but certainly in terms of cashless payments, a lot of people don't carry cash anymore. So, they they can't buy lunch if there's a tech outage.
Yeah, I was at TGI Fridays last year and the tech completely went out. Every system went down. I'm a millennial. I don't carry a single dollar on me. And so I was like, I don't know how to pay. And the woman was like, you can Venmo my personal account, the waitress. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. Thank you very much. So I left my number and I was like, you can call me and I will pay over the phone or I will come in person. But we rely on so much. I think that a lot of companies could do well with some sort of backup, like a Square or some sort of phone that had just one phone that's on a separate system, that's on something that you could just say, this is in case of emergency. We're not going to use it unless it's an emergency, but you pay $100 a month for it maybe. And, in the scheme of things, it's not that much, but you have it because these are happening more and more. Think about all the times that your internet goes out. My internet goes out a decent amount. I pay for it. I have no reason why it goes out. They don't tell you why it goes out. It just happens. Some things are out of your control, but like Joanna was saying, there's ways that you can take charge of what it could be and lessen the impact.
Well, and figure out ways to make sure you communicate with your customers so that they understand what's going on. And, you're going to take a hit. Maybe, handing out some free food because you can't accept payment is something to do. Like,
Yeah.
we're sorry, here are some fries.
Yeah, that's what Panera employees were saying. But when they were posting online, they were saying that's what they basically had to do. That they had so much free food basically because it was impossible for orders to go through. And yeah, I think communication is very important. I also spoke with a professional in the tech vendor space. Um, who reminded me that tech outages should not necessarily just rest on the shoulders of the IT team. I mean, assuming that your company is big enough to have an IT team, um, and that employees in general should be trained on how to deal with what happens when there are tech outages, and also how to prevent if it is a cyber attack, how to prevent something like that from happening, and to have training so that they don't just kind of feel left out in the cold if and when that does happen.
I was trying to wait because there was a big siren, but there was no time to wait. All right, Bret, it is time to talk about the James Beard Awards. So there was a big shakeup in the awards a few years ago, the way that they, picked awards, the way they had their committee, and you've written a lot about it. You wrote about it last year, and you just wrote about it on Wednesday when the awards came out. So can you tell me a little bit about, what happened this year and how it's sort of different than years before?
So, for many years, the Beard Awards were um, mostly given to chefs in uh, large cities, major markets, where a lot of the judges, of which I was one for a number of years, I don't know how long, judges are members of the media and also former winners of the Beard Awards. So, a lot of chefs. And it sort of perpetuated the same people in the same restaurant companies winning the same awards over and over again, heavily weighted toward straight white men. Um, and so they started to come under pressure for that before the pandemic. And then after or during the pandemic, the awards were basically canceled in 2020 and 2021. I mean, they threw some celebrations, but it was more celebrating the industry rather than, picking winners and then inevitably losers. But during that time, they really did some soul searching into what these awards should be. And they decided that there needs to be a social, moral component to it. And so they required anybody nominating a potential winner to make a little brief statement about how they work toward essentially making the food world and their communities better places. This year, they added to that a requirement that potential nominees had to make their own either personal statements, essays, do a video, whatever, about why their restaurants are so cool. Um, and so before, in theory, the awards acknowledged and honored culinary excellence. That was the idea. Whether that was actually the case is a different conversation, but that at least on paper is what it was. And now it's more restaurants that are cool and nice to their communities, etc. Which the old guard obviously is complaining and harumphing and like, I've never heard of these chefs. Who are they? And of course, just because you haven't heard of them, like maybe expand your horizons a little. It's not their fault that you haven't heard of them. Do your research. But with the awards being more ambiguous in terms of what exactly they're honoring, I think, and I put forward the argument in the piece that I wrote on Wednesday, that it dilutes the prestige of the awards because nobody really knows what they stand for. However, anytime you get nominated for an award, that is a feather in your cap, something you get to put on your resume and write press releases about and send out to the world. And so if you go to jamesbeard.org, you can take a look at all of the nominees. There are many, and they're all over the place. They are mostly not in big cities. They're in smaller markets where previously they were less likely to get much attention unless someone like Guy Fieri came by and did a piece on them. And so I think that the prestige of the awards is being diminished because nobody knows what they are, but they're probably doing more good by giving awards to people that nobody has heard of. I mean, nobody, the award winners before like 2018, 19 didn't need more attention. Like everybody already knew who they were, everybody in the food world at least. And so it's more just another feather in their cap, and they get to go on with their lives. And it definitely improves business when you win a Beard Award, or really any award. Anytime you get attention, uh, people will come to your restaurants. And that's certainly still the case with Beard Award nominees. I attended several press conferences yesterday, virtual press conferences with winners, and they were kind of celebrating the fact that their reservation books were filled up, or they had lines out the door if they didn't accept reservations. So, the awards are changing, and whether they'll actually continue to be as prestigious within the industry as they were is an open question, and I'm interested in seeing how it all shakes out.
Um, yeah, it is really interesting. Obviously, you cover this a lot more, but so I defer to you on these matters. But besides, I feel like in general these awards, not just James Beard's, but also Michelin and other types of awards in the industry, have not only had this aura of kind of like racism and sexism around them because a lot of the old guard was white male, but also at the same time, I do feel like a lot has to do with class. And like for example, this is not the James Beard, but the New York Times just came out with its list of the 100 best restaurants in New York City. And um there were a lot of surprises I know on the list. Because it, and I guess like when Pete Wells was compiling it, he was like, well, we need at least like, whatever it was, like 8 to 10 of these have to be, Michelin starred restaurants. And then there were a couple of we might as well put throw this in there. I think they had like a halal cart or some sort of a food cart in there. And it sort of seemed like throwing a little bit of a bone, but I feel like the awards like James Beard Awards do have this kind of aura around them of just being like restaurants are not only, like you said, the reservation books are filling up, but not only difficult to get into, but also, usually fairly expensive. And so can you find really great food, really great meal experiences in places that aren't very expensive in not major cities and in that are run by, not the white guy that everybody's heard of. Uh, yes. And so I think that this is kind of I guess this is James Beard's attempt at kind of changing that narrative a little bit.
Yeah. And uh, I support and appreciate this. And I brought this up on Facebook, which is my social medium for talking to the restaurant community because I've established a good network there. And one person commented that what the Beard Foundation seems to be trying to do is acknowledge everybody in the restaurant industry. And there are so many restaurants everywhere of so many different price points for so many different occasions that it is not possible to cover it all. And I think this is a challenge that they're facing. And in a good way, I think the lists of nominees every year for the past 3 years at least have been really different each year, and that means that new people get to sort of step into the spotlight for a little while, which is cool. But yeah, I was in Houston, I don't know, a few months ago, and the best meal that I had only good meals, but the best one was at this place called Cafeteria. It's a little bakery run by a Cambodian immigrant, and I had a pho kolache that was so good. So a kolache is like a little originally Czech pastry, but it's a big thing in Texas, and it was filled with, spiced meat that you might have in a Vietnamese soup pho. And it was sensational. And, probably cost, I don't know, $6 or something like that. And, this is something that the food world has come to understand, that you don't need to get dressed up and go to a fine dining restaurant anymore. And in fact, most fine dining restaurants don't require that you dress any particular way. They don't have white tablecloths anymore. So, the whole industry is changing in ways that I really like. I do run into, old codgers and traditionalists who, complain that restaurants these days aren't what they used to be. And that's true, but maybe they're better.
Well, this reminds me a lot of, a more famous example of this being the Academy Awards, where it was completely about old white men, were like 97% of the committee. They only picked white actors. And then it threw this big backlash where they had to start including people of color, because so what they did was they built up their committee with more people of color. They admitted younger people and all those kind of things. And this is what it feels like the restaurant industry is doing, is changing the landscape of not only who's getting these awards, but who's behind the scenes of these awards, that they're trying to give more of a diversity of menu type, of price point, of person who's in charge. And then that can in turn change the rest of the industry for the next few years. And it's just rebuilding something that was broken, essentially. I mean, that was so. I mean, I do think that the social impact piece of the Beard Awards is a little weird, and I don't know if that's going to stick long term, but I just think that it's going to evolve, and this is the next stage of the food industry and the culinary industry specifically, saying we see everyone, not just these fine dining restaurants and these big white chefs who've studied under famous chefs who were on the committee, who know all the, like, it was very incestuous. And now it's just very open and free. And I feel like that represents not only the country, but the culinary world. Like, chefs aren't just living in big cities. And I think that that's nice to see, that we have more of a holistic view of what the culinary scene is now.
I do. Sorry, go ahead, Joanna.
I was just going to say, the question then is, should awards have something more to say other than this is the person that is the best? And for a lot of the people that are fans of the old world type of way of doing things and way of giving out awards, their answer would be no. However, what they fail to realize is that a lot of the old guard is going to just continue getting these awards then, because they've kind of benefited from a system that has put them in the spotlight immediately, and then you might not get to recognize or be able to get familiarize yourself with some of these newer names. And so it's kind of a little bit of a catch-22, because obviously you can't please everybody. And I think that's something that other award ceremonies in other industries, like the Oscars and Grammys, for example, go through as well. Like there are race and gender aside, there have been awards that have given out and the Oscars that are specifically for an acknowledgement or nod to this person's career, and they wouldn't necessarily have deserved that award. I don't really want to say specific examples, but it's just been like, this is less an award about your specific role and more of an acknowledgement of like, oh, you've had such a great career and haven't won a Best Actor or Actress Oscar yet, and so you deserve this. And so, yeah, I guess that comes back to that question of what should be the purpose of award ceremonies.
Yeah, it's I think to draw attention to people or places or things that deserve attention. I do take some issue with the requirement for chefs and restaurateurs to make personal statements about their own awesomeness, because a lot of people go into the restaurant industry because they're antisocial and they're not necessarily super polished about expressing themselves. And I think requiring that a chef or restaurateur have media training, that shouldn't be a required skill set for a restaurant operator. Maybe in these days of social media, where that kind of front and center appearance is appropriate, maybe it is becoming more of a requirement for chefs, but maybe also they should hire a social media person to do that so that they can stay back in the kitchen and, cook.
Which is what it's about at the end of the day.
Well, or is it?
Ooh.
We've been talking about tech all day, and, that's super important. All of, there's so much that is required to run a restaurant that media polish is maybe it's not required necessarily. I mean, there are great restaurants in my neighborhood in Brooklyn where the chefs are antisocial and don't want to talk to anybody, but they have good food and they do well with regulars. But if you do want to, have a broader audience or get on a larger stage, I think unfortunately that kind of media presence is important.
Well, good luck to all the chefs out there who need their media presence because it's harder than it looks from 3 journalists who have to do it now. So thank you guys for joining me. I had such a lovely time. This was so much fun, but I'm going to thank you guys for joining me and let you say any final thoughts.
Congratulations to all the nominees too. It's hard even to get nominated, so good job.
Agreed. And thanks, Holly, for having us on.
Stratus Foods is the industry partner you can depend on when you're looking for the very best in fats and oils. Our team of expert researchers, developers, and innovators have helped countless businesses just like yours bring their most delicious menus to life. With products that are reliable, sustainable, and ready to meet any challenge, you can fry, bake, saute, and grill with confidence. Stratus Foods, we've got you covered.
Thank you so much, Ken, for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Looking forward to it.
So first of all, what has Rise Southern Biscuits and Rice's Chicken? First of all, still my favorite name of a brand. What have you guys been up to over the past year or so? And what are you most excited for the year ahead, though we're about a month and a half into it?
Well, this last year, like everybody else, we were dealing with all the fun that happens in the restaurant business with some of the logistics of food and labor. But we've always been able to handle that stuff. We have a pretty great supply chain, and our hours lend to great staffing because a lot of people want to work in the morning. We're open from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. So a lot of our restaurants are on at 2:30, 3 o'clock at the latest. So unfortunately, a lot of people have to work multiple jobs, and this gives them an opportunity. If they have to do that, they can still work something in the evening. So we have been very lucky, knock on wood, when it comes to staffing. Some of the horror stories you're hearing out there in our space, we are not affected like that the same way. Thank you. Again, knocking on wood.
Yeah, that's great. I definitely hear you on that. We've heard so many horror stories of labor and staffing, but it does definitely seem like breakfast and lunch concepts aren't really facing that as much. And I guess, what do you think makes the brand so special for your employees?
Well, we decided a long time ago, it was by accident. We started doing different things for incentives for employees, and the business got better and better. So we're definitely on the higher end of a competitive wage. We have tip pooling as well, so that's on top of that. So I think we have a very, very competitive wage. Obviously, people can eat for free when they're working. A lot of places aren't doing that kind of thing, or they're charging them 50%. We recognize that not everybody wants to wear a name tag, so we just eliminated it. And we used to have all these strict standards on uniforms, and it's not that we don't care about how we look, but we were like, you know what, let's just pare it down, and we give people a t-shirt, we give them a hat, and we even tell them, if you don't want to wear a hat, just wear something you want to wear, right? That reflects who you are, right? So we've gotten great response from that. So we're just trying to eliminate some of the hitches out there that would come into place where they wouldn't want to work for us. And then obviously we have some great hours that really work, and we're really flexible with people. Our main goal that we instill in our managers is to find out what makes your employees tick, find out their story, what they want to do. Typically in our business, It's a stepping stone to somewhere else. So if we can find out that this young person who's going to school has class Tuesdays and Thursdays at a certain time that interferes, let's give them that time off. No questions asked, so they can get to their next level. Because what we've seen is people go and get their education, and then they're like, "Hey, well, I want to come back to Rise because it was so great," right? So we're seeing that happen. We have one of our general managers now was somebody who went to culinary school and got out and got that under her belt for a while, and she's like, you know what, I really want to come back to Rise. And again, she's one of our general managers now, so it's working out for us.
Yeah, I think that flexible scheduling, you hear that so much these days, and that being such an important part of keeping staff engaged and still on board and lowering that turnover rate. And I actually feel like technology kind of plays a role in making sure that that's possible. Do you guys utilize technology to help out with either training or scheduling staff?
Yeah, I mean, we have a training program that we use. It's iPad based, so anybody in the restaurant can go in there and watch any of the videos we have for every single food item that we have in the restaurant. We also have a TV on the wall that loops that training program, so you get to see everything being made. It's on the wall, so if you're just standing around cleaning, you can go, "Oh yeah, that's how I'm supposed to do that." So that's on the wall to reinforce that as well. Anything to do to help the managers um, train a little bit easier, using these tools that we have have worked out quite a bit. Scheduling, we have a scheduling that's inside of our POS, and what it does is it sends an email out to everybody once the schedule's done. And most of our people kind of set schedules because of our hours, but there are changes every once in a while. But they get that email and they're allowed to accept that, and if they don't, an email goes back to the manager and they can work out whatever issue they need to for time.
And speaking of technology, I know that tech has been the forefront of your operations for quite some time. Obviously, besides being known for your biscuits and fried chicken, I know the company has been investing in tech and loyalty, and you've been behind that quite a bit. Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, we don't ever say that there's one person who does anything at Rise. It's definitely a group effort. I just happen to be at the top end of that. But when it comes to tech, Rise was that old-fashioned place that had a register. And, when we were cavemen in this business, we bought a $500 register, and that's all we had to do, right? And everybody could focus on food people. Well, it's changed quite a bit. We knew that for us to grow, we needed to get a more dynamic POS system that had a kitchen display system in the back and an expo system. So we weren't sending tickets back. Mistakes weren't being made. It helped us out tremendously. Our throughput got way better, obviously. Customers were getting orders faster. So, we picked a great POS company. It's cloud-based, and they have open API, which is very important to us, because we want to pick and choose what technologies we want to have. So everybody can have the best Rise experience. So, I mean, but you have to start way off. Who's your internet provider, right? Do you have great internet? Because all of this stuff is coming in through that that little wire. You want to make sure it's coming in as fast as possible. And then you have to set up access points and firewalls. And these are a lot of things that in our business, we didn't even talk about. I mean, it's like a foreign language to a certain extent. And then you get your POS. And then from there, you got to pick what you want to do. I talked about KDS. I talked about an expo station. But that's employee facing. We use kiosks. We're 100% kiosk. And that's worked out really well for us. There was a little bit of learning curve in the beginning. It wasn't very popular at that time. But the pandemic, fortunately, unfortunately, has trained people how to order food via an app or kiosk. And then, we have online ordering that's based off of that as well. And then we also have a screen in our store, and we call it the order ready screen. So if you walked into your restaurant, on one half of the screen, you can see all the orders that are working in the kitchen. And as soon as they hit done in the kitchen, it goes to the ready end of that. And where that has helped us out tremendously is with delivery drivers, because delivery drivers historically used to just come in and shove a phone in somebody's face and say, "Where's my order?" Right?
Mhm.
Well, that was happening to us. So we put this order ready screen up, helped us out a lot. But then we took it another step and we put in these heated lockers, food lockers in the restaurants. So now if you see your name is ready, if you ordered online or if you're a third-party delivery driver, you come in, I can go right to the box. I type in the first name and the last initial. The box blinks and unlocks, and you can get your food. So it's cut way down on people, shopping the locker or the shelves that you see in restaurants. Oh, this is what I want today, and take it. It's eliminated a lot of that. So it's helped us out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of being on the customer end of things, I've definitely been in that situation where I have placed an order and then I come in to pick it up. I have no idea if my order's ready. And then the people behind the counter, of course, they're like busy with other customers. And so I just start going through all the names and I'm just like, I don't know if mine's ready or not.
Right.
I'm curious, what was your decision? Because the pickup lockers, they're heated, right?
They are.
So what went into your thought process there? Because I feel like, at the National Restaurant Association show and tech trade shows in general, here you see a lot of the lockers that aren't heated.
Yeah, I mean, we serve hot food. We want to make sure it's as hot as possible. Customers, they type in what time they want to have their food, but, traffic gets in the way, life gets in the way. I might be 5 minutes late. I might be 7 minutes late. I might be 3 minutes early. Well, the food's hot when you get there. And that's a big thing for us. If you order hot food, you should get hot food. Mm-hmm. So we spend the money to make sure that we have those lockers in place to help that out. I mean, it's helped us third party. I mean, in this day and age, third party drivers are taking 1 and 2 deliveries. So as hot as the food can possibly be, if you are that second delivery, it's still getting to the customer at the appropriate temperature, in our opinion.
Yeah. And so actually I'm curious then, how do you separate then cold items like drinks or sides or whatever?
So our restaurant is takeout only. We have some tables, we have patios, and we have self-service drinks. So, we ask the drivers to pick up their own drinks, or we'll put their drinks in a bag, and we have little signs inside that says, "Don't forget your drinks." Or we have some dessert items, donut items. We say, "Don't forget your donuts." So it's this big sign that goes in front of the bag. I'm not going to say nobody's ever forgotten, but it's a lot harder when you have to see that sign in the locker.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about how having an open API allows you to kind of figure out what belongs in your tech stack and what doesn't. How do you figure that out? Kind of what do you think is the best thing to put in Rise's tech stack and what isn't a good fit?
So, we decided once we wanted to go down this tech stack, we want to be a tech leader as well as a great restaurant. Mm-hmm. So again, you have to have a great system to start off with, and then this open API. And then what you have to decide is, what are you trying to accomplish? Is your job to make something as easy as possible for a guest? And what would be easy for a guest? So when somebody orders third party, historically, you would have 19 different tablets set up to your POS. And then when an order comes in from that tablet, you would punch it in. Well, we recognize that. First off, that's a time suck for our employees. So we got an aggregator. So all the orders come into the aggregator, and then they all go right into the POS automatically. So right now we're streamlining that ordering process, which makes it faster. So that was an easy decision for us. The order ready screen, we felt like people were always wanting to know where their food was. So instead of asking somebody, they can see where it was. And then obviously we have loyalty. Inside of loyalty, we have an app, and you can obviously get your points and you see where you stand, but you can also place an order from there. So it's ease of ordering as well. And what we were really fortunate is whatever you see on our kiosk, that's exactly the way it looks online. So you have people can recognize if I go here, it looks the same as here. There's nothing different. I always know that I can get a chicken biscuit. That's the top thing. And I can go here. It's the top thing as well. And then we have that same look and feel and setup for all the third parties. So that recognition is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the kiosks, why do you think the kiosks were a good fit for you then?
Well, at one time we used to take everybody's order, and that can slow you down. I mean, you have a great cashier. It's awesome, but in this day and age, it was getting harder and harder to get cashiers to really invest in understanding the menu, and we would do all the typical things. We would sit them down. They'd learn the menu. There'd be some testing, but again, we were catching people on their phones, watching a show or something while they're trying to take an order. And I hope this wasn't just at Rise. I think I've seen it happen in a few other places where the customer wasn't the focus. So we put kiosks on the wall as well. And we were noticing a lot of people were going to the kiosk because I know what I want to get. It's super easy for me to hit a button, push a button, and then pay with my credit card. And people were just in and out. And then we were like, you know what? This is what we think the future looks like. And before the pandemic, we were going kiosk only. And then obviously the pandemic made it an even easier decision because people could understand how it works. And then we went credit card only during the pandemic. Everybody was still able to pay. And we kept that going because what I noticed is we didn't get robbed anymore. Nobody came in trying to rob you if you don't take cash. So then it became a security thing for my employees. And I was like, why would I put them in harm's way to take cash when everybody was able to buy something for, 2.5, 3 years during the pandemic with a credit card? Now, do people come in and ask? Absolutely. And we let them know. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And some people get upset about that, but generally people are very understanding and have credit cards or debit cards and pay that way.
It kind of sounds like post-pandemic, you had to figure out what kind of pandemic era technology and operations were a good fit for you guys still.
We were reading the tea leaves 5 years ago on what we wanted to get to. Going to the different conferences, going to a lot of conferences and shows, and everybody talking about this magic tech that you need to get involved in. And, we were thinking it was going to be 5-7 years down the road. We're going to be in a good place. We're going to have this infrastructure built. But then all of a sudden, the world changed and we had that infrastructure and we thrived. And I hate saying that because so many people didn't do well during the pandemic, but we did well because we had that. We weren't calling up saying, hey, we want online ordering now. We already had that worked out. We had all the third-party integrations worked out. So we were, after a week after the pandemic happened, we were right back to normal business. But it was all coming through those avenues. There was no in-store whatsoever, right? So we were doing the same business because we had this infrastructure in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like an important part of that kind of digital infrastructure is loyalty. So could you tell me a bit about your approach to loyalty?
Well, we want to make sure that people, are loved at Rise, right? If you're coming in, you should get something. And obviously, we all know loyalty is marketing as well, right? So we were probably missing it on that end. We make sure that we treat loyalty the way we want to be treated from a loyalty company. I don't want to get harassed. I don't want an email every day telling me I need to get this or that. So we limit that very much. But if somebody downloads the app, we get to communicate with that customer for free. If they don't, and they have texting, if they allow texting, then we can text, and that costs a little bit of money, but it's very inexpensive in the marketing world. And, we just, we run numbers every single month on where we're at. We let all of our stores know this is how many new customers you got into the system. We are at 1.4 to 1.5 times a week a loyalty person is coming in. So if you use loyalty, you're getting a lot of points, and we're seeing them come to the restaurant a lot more engaging. So it's been really, really great for us.
I love that you said that you're trying to kind of, I guess, think about it from the perspective of a guest. And so how do you balance making sure that you are communicating with your customers without, as you said, annoying or harassing them?
Well, again, I mean, everybody opens up their email and most of it's not even for them. I mean, it is, but it's from a company thinking that they need to talk to you at that moment. You know, it's in our terms. You're going to accept, you're going to get a minimum of one thing a month, right? I mean, and outside of that, you know, a special here and there, but you're not going to get the, hey, on Tuesday, this is what's happening. On Wednesday, this is what's happening. On Thursday, I mean, it becomes overkill, and then nobody listens to you, right? Because it's just that white noise that we have to deal with everywhere else. So if this is a special customer, you're going to talk to them. You know, they can opt in for more, right? I mean, we'll talk to you more, but we want to make sure that we're not intrusive on you in your life. You got enough going on. You're not worrying about a biscuit until you want to worry about a biscuit.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. And I'm curious, what tech investments, if any, do you think you guys are missing that you would like the Rise brand to invest in the future?
Well, you know, we want our data. We want our data. We want our data. Well, we're getting a lot of data points now. It's turned into really a kind of a full-time job. And if you don't have a system that can get all this data and correlate it for you in a fashion that you want so you can make your decisions, you're just getting all this data. It's great. We got all this data. What are you going to do with it? Right. So, you know, we have somebody who works on the team who pulls some data in that we want. But what I'm looking at for the future, you know, I keep hearing all this stuff about conversational AI reporting, which blows my mind, right? It has the webhooks on everything so it can pull whatever information, and I can say, hey, how many biscuits did we sell on Monday compared to Tuesday? And I don't have to look anything up, and AI tells me, oh, you did this much better or this much worse on these days. And then we can look into why. What was the day part? What hour was it? What 15 minutes was it where we saw that lacking? And then is there something that we can do working with our branding and marketing team to change that?
Thank you so much, Ken. This is a great conversation.
Stratus Foods is the industry partner you can depend on when you're looking for the very best in fats and oils. Our team of expert researchers, developers, and innovators have helped countless businesses just like yours bring their most delicious menus to life. With products that are reliable, sustainable, and ready to meet any challenge, you can fry, bake, saute, and grill with confidence. Stratus Foods, we've got you covered.